Today's head-on is Very Weird Reptiles, Uncle Sam's wonderful collection from Death Valley. The subhead-on says, Most amazing lizards. Some of them can outrun a racehorse, others are armor-plated, while others make a juicy dish. Rattlesnakes with horns, odd desert toads. This article came from a correspondent of the Times, from Washington, July 14th. It says, the most remarkable collection of North American reptiles ever got together will furnish the subject of a bulletin soon to be issued by the Department of Agriculture. They were obtained from Death Valley by the recent government expedition. The most striking element of the fauna in that strange desert region would seem to be the big lizards of many species which occur in such numbers and in forms so strange as to well nigh counterfeit on a smaller scale the vanished age of Mesozoic saurians. Some of them carry bouquets of lovely flowers in their stomachs, while others can outstrip the fastest racehorse in running, and others are yet clad in plates of armor. There's one kind which actually resembles in miniature a gigantic reptilian type with a chalk-forming epic. One species is very good to eat. It attains a length of about 1 foot, is fat, and when properly prepared tastes like bullfrog. Dr. A.K. Fisher and others of the expedition ate several specimens of this kind, lacking other meat, and found them good. The Indians of that region depend to a considerable extent for food upon the creature, which they call chuckwalla. They hook it out from the clefts in the rocks by means of a forked stick or a bit of wire. To catch it on the run is out of the question. So active is the animal that it's hard to get within gunshot of it. This remarkable lizard subsists wholly on buds and flowers. When cut open, its stomach is usually found to contain a good-sized bouquet of yellow cassius, lotus blossoms, and salmon-colored mallows. Not less extraordinary is the so-called gridiron-tailed lizard, which carries its caudal appendage coiled over its back as if it were afraid to put it down on the hot sand. This animal inhabits the open desert and runs with amazing swiftness. It starts at full speed and stops with equal suddenness, thus eluding hawks, coyotes, and other foes. When at rest, its colors harmonize so well with those of the ground that it can hardly be seen. No horse can keep up with it when it's doing its best gait. The expedition had a dog, a Russian terrier, which thought it would be fun to chase these lizards. At the first half-dozen trials, it was much surprised to see the reptile pass like a flash out of the range of vision. In fact, the creature travels with such velocity that the eye can hardly follow it. During its leisure moments, the gridiron tail amuses itself by going through a curious sort of gymnastic exercise on the rocks. Placing itself with its elbows at the sharpest angle with its body, it alternately lifts and lowers itself on its forelegs. Thus it will continue to hump itself for many minutes together. It is about 8 inches long. Insects and flowers furnish its food. Lizards of bigger species eat it when they get the chance. Among its enemies is the leopard lizard, which gets its name from its spots. It attains a length of 14 inches and is very fierce and greedy. Though chiefly a vegetable feeder, it also eats horned toads, smaller lizards, and even its own species. In the stomach of one young male that was examined, 2 full-grown lizards of less size were found. A female that was cut open contained 1 full-grown horned toad and remnants of a specimen of her own kind. These creatures sometimes swallow lizards 2/3 as big as themselves. Another odd species is the whip-tailed lizard, which is clad in plates of armor. It lives on insects, is very slender, and runs like a streak of greased lightning. Its color when alive is plain brown. For that reason, Dr. Merriam, who had charge of the expedition, was much surprised at a report respecting the animal which was made by Dr. Steniger of the Smithsonian Institution, to whom all the Death Valley reptiles were handed over for examination and classification. Dr. Steniger said that the creature had beautiful blue stripes. He had seen it only after it was preserved in alcohol and the spirits, for some unknown reason, produced these bands of blue. The lizard that resembles so remarkably a typical saurian of the Mesozoic age is 14 inches long and was wholly on vegetable food. It has been named the Dipsosaurus. On the sides of the mountain which hem in the valley are found queer scaly lizards 10 inches in length, which live in the yucca trees 20 or 30 feet above the ground, feeding on insects. Though they could not run fast on level ground, their legs being very short, they jump about so quickly that they are very hard to catch. One of the most remarkable reptiles known is the horned rattlesnake. This species was considered very rare up to the time of this expedition, but its name in Death Valley is legion. In fact, there are myriads of them there. Dr. Merriam shot one and stepped forward to knock over another when one of his men cried, "Look out, you are standing on one." The doctor jumped about 16 feet. The serpent had been tightly coiled up, but the doctor had stopped so squarely upon it that his weight had prevented it from striking. The snake is the smallest of all rattlers. It is about 2 feet long, all specimens seeming to run about the same size. It feeds on kangaroo rats and pocket mice, lying in wait for them at the mouths of their holes. It is extremely vicious, and its bite is said to be fatal, though this latter fact is doubted. The horned rattlesnake is commonly called a sidewinder because when disturbed it moves away sidewise in order to avoid turning tail. Another kind of serpent very numerous in the valley is the tiger rattlesnake. It is about 3.5 feet long. Rattlers in the west do not grow much bigger than that, though there is a different race of them in Florida, which attains a length of 10 feet. Dr. Fisher's party killed 19 of these snakes during a walk of 8 miles. They get their name from their stripes. In the same region, another kind of serpent is plentiful, which though not venomous is very ill-tempered and will fight like anything. It is of a larger size, measuring about 4 feet and is cream-colored, with black rings and very thick in body. Among the most curious creatures of that strange region are the horned toads, which are found in great numbers everywhere. They are peculiarly desert animals, their hideousness making them appropriate to their surroundings. They live on hard-shelled beetles and other insects. One of the oddest things about them is their mode of combat with one another. They fight like bulls, putting their heads down and butting. Apparently they make no effort to hurt each other, but each tries to turn his adversary over. The one that is finally upset goes away at once, humiliated, and hides itself. The purpose of the contest seems merely to be to injure the pride of the opponent. The popular belief that these batrachians squirt blood out of their eyes when they're angry has long been regarded as an absurdity. Certainly it has never been credited by science until now, but that this is true has recently been proved by experiments. One of the horned toads brought to Washington for observation has demonstrated this, and it's believed that it's intended to frighten an enemy. As a provision for such a purpose, it is unquestionably unique. Not less remarkable are the peculiar desert toads of Death Valley, which are found buried in the clay soil and actually baked into the solid ground so that they had to be split out. Thus they remain for a year or two together. When a shower comes, a very rare occurrence in that country, the clay is softened and they crawl out to enjoy themselves for a few hours. After a day or so, the ground dries up and they hastily dig into it and retire for another long period of repose. It is not difficult to imagine the hardening of the soil into permanent rock from which these creatures might be split out a millennium hence, as is said to have happened with toads similarly buried centuries ago. When they do eat, these toads of the desert feed on insects, like others of their kind. Death Valley is the greatest congregating place on Earth of scorpions. They are found there by millions, growing to a huge size. Quite a number were captured, put in alcohol, and brought back to Washington by the expedition. They were handed over to Dr. Marks of the Department of Agriculture, who is the greatest authority in this country on arachnids. He showed one of them to your correspondent yesterday, measuring it with a foot rule. It was exactly 4.5 inches long. These fierce little creatures are not seen in the daytime, being nocturnal in their habits. However, when pulling up bushes for firewood, they were apt to be found among the roots. They would crawl under the blankets at night for the sake of warmth. In the morning, each member of the exploring party was apt to find 1 or 2 scorpions on the underside of his blanket. They secrete such a quantity of venom in the 2 poison glands at the end of the tail that their sting is quite dangerous. Dr. Marks explained that scorpions rank highest among the arachnids, being above the spiders and next below the true insects. The popular belief formerly was that no life existed in Death Valley. The expedition demonstrated that this was extremely far from being the truth. In the bottom of the valley is a flat of crystalline salt 60 miles long and from 2 to 6 miles wide, which is absolutely devoid of life, vegetable or animal. Around that flat is a fringe that is less salt, where are found fleshy plants such as grow in salt marshes. Around that is a rim of more productive soil, with greasewood bushes, peculiarly desert plants, which require alkali to feed upon. Then come the gravel slopes toward the mountains, which have a score of species of desert bushes, many of them bearing most beautiful flowers in the early spring. The leaves appear in March and the seeds ripen quickly. They have to do so, else the subsequent heat would kill them. Seeds and leaves drop off in the early summer, and the plants during the rest of the year are mere dry sticks. The foliage of these desert plants is grayish, the only one that has any green leaves being the creosote bush, which is the most characteristic type of the vegetation in that region. It bears big yellow flowers, somewhat resembling buttercups, and its seeds are like small nuts covered with wool. The leaves have a varnish to prevent evaporation of the juices, and this varnish is now being utilized commercially in the manufacturing of a sort of shellac. On the west side of the valley are sand dunes crowned with straggly mesquite bushes, which are the biggest of the desert plants, attaining a height of 20 feet. Among them swarm kangaroo rats, which squat on their hind legs erect and use their tails to help them jump. To hold spare food, they have pouches outside their cheeks lined with fur. They feed on the beans in the mesquite. Some of these beans are the so-called screw beans, which look like bunches of screws, but other varieties growing together with them have straight pods. The Indians are very fond of the beans, making bread out of them. Roasted, pods and all, they are very sweet and good. In that region are also innumerable scorpion mice, the only essentially carnivorous mice known, which feed on scorpions and lizards. They are big land turtles more than a foot long, which shut up when they are alarmed like box turtles. The Indians are very fond of their flesh, and so are the coyotes. 2 kinds of desert bats there are, both nearly white and one with big ears. There are desert foxes, which feed on lizards and kangaroo rats chiefly. The latter rodents furnish provender for many badgers. There is a kind of bird that lives in the mesquite bushes, which feeds on the lizards. All these animals are nocturnal in their habits. The only ones which go abroad in the daytime are a few jackrabbits, cottontail rabbits, and white-tailed chipmunks. In Furnace Creek, which runs down into the valley from the Funeral Mounds, are frogs. One of the most wonderful things about these animals of the desert is the peculiar coloring which nature has resorted to for their protection. For example, the horned toads always take the tint to the soil in which they are found. On the alkali ground, they are as white as a sheet of notepaper, while on the lava crust they are dark, so that the foxes and coyotes which prey on them may not spy them. The rattlesnakes on the valley plain are of a pale hue, while on the mountain sides they are nearly black. The white-tailed chipmunk is exactly the color of the desert sand. When this little squirrel is stationary, it cannot be seen, but when it runs away, it throws its tail over its back. The tail then shows a gleaming white, being intended as a signal to other chipmunks. This is considered an extraordinary instance of provision at the same time for protection and recognition. This story comes from the great state of Pennsylvania, being reported in the Philadelphia Times of July 16, 1893. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, now remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.